ObiWan Kenobi asks the Jedi Knight Qui-Gon Jinn just why they have come out in the middle of this desert. Qui-Gon says, as he told him before in the ship, now that he has completed his Jedi training with Yoda, now he has to give him some real-world experience. But Obi-Wan says that there is nothing here but ruins. Qui-Gon tells him that there is something here, that the wasteland does not arise from lack of water, but from the presence of the dark side of the Force. Obi-Wan does not sense the dark side, but Qui-Gon says that it is only because of their combined presence and training that permits it to not have any negative influence upon them. Qui-Gon suggests they leave the hut so he can show him the surroundings. Around them are only the remains of buildings, crumbling to bits within the Forsaken landscape, just as uninhabitable as one contaminated by nuclear radiation. Qui-Gon explains how the Force can inhabit people and objects, but also places. They enter some of the remaining dwellings left by their former inhabitants. Obi-Wan asks if the devastation will ever clear from the area, and Qui-Gon says that eventually it will, but it has already been over 2 centuries, and not a thing grows there still. Obi-Wan looks around again, asking what happened here. Qui-Gon answers that no one really knows, as everyone who lived here died suddenly. Obi-Wan continues to scout around, then hears a sound nearby. He calls out to Qui-Gon, but he notices that Qui-Gon is nowhere near him. He hears a sound again, and goes in search of it by himself, just taking his lightsaber hilt from his belt. Obi-Wan moves cautiously, and around to where the sound is coming from. It is not Qui-Gon, but a young girl. The girl sees him, and quickly runs from him. Obi-Wan pursues her, calling to her not to be frightened of him. He has no trouble locating her, though she is at first a bit shy, hiding behind a piece of old equipment, rusting away where it stands. Obi-Wan then puts his hilt back on his belt and attempts to make contact with the girl. He asks who she is, and if she's hungry. The girl approaches him timidly, seeming to understand him. He tells the girl that he and his friend are Jedi Knights, and that they will not harm her. After the girl settles down, he calls out to Qui-Gon, and is concerned by the Jedi's disappearance. But first he takes the girl in to shelter her from the rising winds, and gives her something to eat, finding out her name is Kitty, and asking where she came from, and warns her of the danger, unable to explain the dark side to her. But she says she feels safe now. But Obi-Wan is clearly concerned about the whereabouts of Qui-Gon, and what might have happened to him. The girl goes out and pumps water from a water pump, and this is much desired by both herself and Obi. But with the sandstorm blowing up, he could not go out. Obi-Wan places boards and other remnants against the open door to block out the wind. The girl then goes to sleep in Obi-Wan's arms, clutching onto a blanket. Obi-Wan then lies down himself. During the night, however, even through the still blowing sand, there are shadows passing over the outside of the huts. The girl hears something, and stirs, rising up. The figures have no trouble breaking into the hut, and one of them enters, and approaches her, clamping its hand around her mouth. He drags her away from Obi-Wan, as she reaches out to him, dropping her blanket. Obi-Wan stirs, sensing something wrong. Opening his eyes, he sees the figure exiting the hut. Jumping up, he ignites his lightsaber, and quickly goes out after them. Kitty is now calling out to Obi-Wan. But when he exits the hut, however, a second figure fires plasma bolts in his direction, which he deflects with his saber. Then it runs off to its ship. By this time they have already entered. As Obi-Wan runs, but it is all for naught. The ship was waiting for takeoff and rises up into the atmosphere. Obi-Wan stands watching the ship until it is well out of his view. Then he goes into the structure where their mounts were held, but they are both gone. He has no way to return to their ship. Obi-Wan has to get back to the shelter, and upon entering he finds the girl's blanket lying in a heap. Taking it up, he cannot help himself, and cries into it. Obi-Wan wakes in the morning, still clutching the blanket, but hears something. Someone is operating the water pump outside. He springs up and rushes out, but their working is not the girl, nor Qui-Gon, but a tall and peculiar-looking robot. It turns, and looks in Obi-Wan's direction, then approaches him. He speaks to the robot, but it does not answer, just staring in his direction. But he invites it into the hut, and the robot accompanies him, and he drinks the water it pumped for him. He asks the robot questions, realizing that no matter what it cannot speak. It just sits there looking blankly towards him. Then it suddenly reaches out its hand, and Obi-Wan is left confused. It is motioning to the girl's blanket, which he mentions is not anything of his, but it belonged to someone else, someone who was not there anymore. He tells the robot his problem, that his partner disappeared, and then he found a girl, but she was carried off by pirates, but that their mounts were taken too, and so it appears the two of them are stuck there together. He names the robot after an old robot he had when he was a boy, that he had named Try, which he says was the name of the third robot he had attempted to get to work. Obi-Wan only hopes that Qui-Gon can find his way back to him, but tells the robot that he is welcome to remain with him. The robot still looks blankly, but during the night Obi-Wan notices that the robot picks up the girl's blanket and covers himself with it. The next day Obi-Wan exits the hut and looks up, seeing the pirate ship and the pirate standing. He immediately calls Try, and then ignites his lightsaber, and rushes the figure, furiously running to him. Try exits the hut and walks forward. Obi-Wan comes up to the figure, standing still, as though waiting for his arrival. Obi-Wan is tense, emotional, but he merely stands. He demands to know from him what he has done with the girl. The figure then moves its arm and Obi-Wan tells him that he mustn't move. The figure stands still and says nothing. Obi-Wan tells him that he must tell him, he must speak, and threatens him with his lightsaber. Then asks him where is the girl. The being does nothing, but lifts one of his fingers and points past him. Obi-Wan is startled and glances back. The only thing behind him is the robot standing there. Obi-Wan tells him that he doesn't understand what he means, that the girl is not here. He points again at the robot. Obi-Wan asks if he means Try, and the figure nods. He doesn't understand, but then looks at the robot holding the blanket, then at the water pump, then at the robot's staring eyes. He suddenly realizes, raises his lightsaber as if to strike. Then he holds back, telling the figure that he will answer for his crimes, and that he will commandeer his ship, and that he will take him back to the Republic to face trial. Then a human hand drops on his shoulder. He jumps, and turns his head. There is Qui-Gon. He asks Qui-Gon where he has been, then tells him that he has arrested a pirate who's kidnapping children, and then turning them into robots. Obi-Wan is clearly distressed with his eyes full of tears, eager to see justice done. But Qui-Gon asks, but where are they? Obi-Wan turns, and the pirate is gone, his ship is gone, and is startled. Obi-Wan looks behind him, and the robot too is gone. There are no footprints in the sand. Only Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are there. Obi-Wan takes a second, then drops his head, lowering, and switching off his lightsaber. He then speaks to Qui-Gon, and says this was a test, and Qui-Gon answers, yes. Qui-Gon says that the dark powers here have a strong influence, and one not trained in the Jedi ways would reveal here the evil of his mind. Obi-Wan looks regretful, and tells him how close he came to striking out against the pirate. Qui-Gon, however, reinforces that he didn't do it. He didn't take revenge even when provoked by evil and has feelings. Obi-Wan says he almost was not able to confront it and fight it off, but Qui-Gon says that the dark power here is so intense that such a place is only for those who show superior affiliation with the Force. So everything after they parted was an illusion, but he asks how Qui-Gon was able to resist it himself, and he says that he went into a trance and was able to block himself out of Obi-Wan's mind. So Obi-Wan says that he was there all the time, and he says, yes. But Obi-Wan admits that he both understands now the nature of evil, and how closely he came to succumbing to it. Obi-Wan then tells Qui-Gon that he understands what happened here now, what evil happened in this dark place, that the children were captured by raiders, and they were used to make robots, that were sold back to their own people. He looks at the robot bodies, corroding out of the hill. Obi-Wan is still shaken, but is assured the experience has made him stronger, and that he has learned something from this experience, that if he is going to have struggles it is better to do it, when the outcome doesn't matter. But Obi-Wan pledges to Qui-Gon that he will never stand so close to the dark side again, and he replies to him that this is why Yoda puts apprentices through the test. So Obi-Wan asks if that was it, the final test, is he a Jedi now? But Qui-Gon answers him, not yet, but he tells him that from now on there will be no more training, no more illusions, that the final test will be real. Obi-Wan asks about their mounts, and Qui-Gon tells them that they are safe and sound. Then he asks them if they might leave, and Qui-Gon says that they no longer have any reason to stay. Obi-Wan goes into the hut to collect his things, and notices there amongst the litter there a blanket just like the girl's. He picks it up, looks around the room, and stuffs it into his bag. He leaves the hut as Qui-Gon brings up the mounts, and climbs onto one. Then Obi-Wan onto the other, and Qui-Gon heads off in a new direction, and Obi-Wan asks if they aren't going back to the ship. Qui-Gon tells him that there is a small community still living nearby, and they're going to stop off there to pick up provisions, before heading back to the ship, saying to him they've been there for a few days, and that maybe there they can find out more about this place. They continue to talk as they leave the rebel land ruins behind them, but Obi-Wan cannot help but glance back just one final time, placing his hand on his pack one final time for the soul he left behind.